learned Dialectical Behavioural Therapy, or DBT, which is sort of an offshoot of CBT, which I talked about in my last video. DBT is most often used for individuals who are having some difficulty regulating their emotion. So like whenever we are given a new tool or technique at Rhodes, we learned about it by actually doing it on ourselves as well as on our classmates. So the task this week was to try to find a situation in our own lives in which we feel that our emotions are unregulated. And then we were assigned a counselor to help us work on different ways that we can manage emotions when those situations come up. And the way that you do this is by looking at your window of tolerance. So DBT is largely based around the idea of this window of tolerance, which is a psychological state that you are in when you are able to acknowledge and feel your emotions and still think rationally. So it's a nice balance of emotion and rational thought. If you go out of your window of tolerance, you're either flooding and you're overspilling with emotion and the pain or the anger or the sadness is too much and so you're not even able to think clearly, or you can go under the window of tolerance in which you're outside because you have dissociated, meaning that you have checked out, you don't want to feel, you don't want to think about what's actually going on, and you have just left the situation. In really extreme circumstances, for example, if someone has undergone a quite serious trauma, dissociation could actually mean that they forget that this happened. And on a regular basis, it could just be something like, oh, there was another mass shooting? Great, I'm just gonna turn off the TV and listen to Christmas music. Not acknowledging the reality of the situation, just checked out. Checking out is equally as dangerous as flooding. In both situations, the goal is to get yourself back into the window of tolerance where you can acknowledge what is actually happening in front of you and feel your feelings without becoming overwhelmed by them. So the way that you do this is you use tools that are given to you by your DBT therapist that are meant to help you improve your emotional regulation as well as your distress tolerance. So distress tolerance is when a person realizes that they are at risk of leaving their window of tolerance, and so they take preventative measures to keep themselves inside that window by controlling their outside environment. I am great at this. The issue that I was really working on this week was that I tend to get really stressed out or anxious if I feel like I have too much on my plate or if I'm gonna be late for something. I can be a tad uptight or perfectionisty. So if I know that I'm in that situation and I'm thinking that I'm going to leave my window of tolerance, I do a whole bunch of things to keep myself sane. I talk the situation out. I write a list. I call a friend. I make a new plan. I cut my losses and I proceed without all of the necessary pieces. Emotional regulation, on the other hand, is an internal process whereby when you find yourself out of your window of tolerance, you are able to bring yourself back in using grounding or containment techniques that are used to help you reconnect with your reality and restore a sense of calm. I am not so good at this. If I am panicking because I'm going to be late for something, I do not take calm, restoring breaths and count to 10 and bring myself down. I get angry and I blame the person who is making me late and I leave without them, or if I'm by myself, I call ahead to my final destination and I tell them that transit is backed up, regardless of whether or not that is actually the case. So again, I am awesome at taking control of my environment, but I am not so good at the regulating myself from the inside. So needless to say, my counselor and I worked on emotional regulation this week and different things that I could do to try to just find my center again without having to manually take control of what was going on around me. It's really hard. It's hard work, all of this work that you do on yourself. Before I went to Rhodes, I thought like, hey, I've got my stuff together. You know, I read Brene Brown. And then I get there and it turns out that there's so much stuff that I didn't even know, that I didn't know about myself, that I need to figure out. Or at least it would be really beneficial to all of my loved ones if I did figure it out. So I'm working on emotional regulation when I get stressed out. I'm sure my boyfriend will appreciate that. He tends to not care if we're late. I tend to be very anxious if we're not 5 minutes early. That is all I have for you today for a little lesson with a touch of insight. If you want to learn more about DBT or book a session, please message me on Facebook, or you can contact the school at rhodescollege.ca. You can go there to find out more information about programs or for contact information if you have more questions for the school.